Hello, Waterloo Region. You're listening to Meet the Candidate on CKMS-FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. My name is Bob Jonkman. In this episode, we meet Clayton Moore, Liberal Party candidate for Waterloo. In Meet the Candidate, Radio Waterloo provides 25 minutes of free airtime to the Waterloo Region candidates running in the Ontario provincial election. This is not an interview, but 25 minutes of unstructured time. Candidates could tell you about their party platform, the local Waterloo Region issues they'll be tackling, why they're running, or what they do outside of politics. Note that the views expressed are not necessarily those of Radio Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. Now, let's meet Clayton Moore, a Liberal Party candidate for Waterloo.
I'm not exactly what you would call a natural politician. I was a scientist by education, studying molecular biology and genetics before moving on to graduate school, where I studied bioinformatics, really focusing on grapevine virology and really understanding the evolutionary dynamics of viruses. So politics for me was a bit of a jump from my background as a scientist. But overall, what I've seen is we've got a ton of challenges that we've been facing, and we've got too many folks who aren't approaching politics with future in mind or really planning for a future. Everyone seems to be thinking just 4 years ahead, always thinking to the next election, and no one's really thinking to the next generation. So I think we absolutely need to make sure that we've got really passionate people in office that are fighting to make sure that we're maintaining a future of Ontario that everybody can be proud of and everyone can fight for. And I'm really proud to be the Ontario Liberals candidate in Waterloo, and I hope to hold up that legacy. And before we start, I actually want to start off with a bit of a story. I mean, there's this famous moment in literature when somebody had asked Ernest Hemingway how he went bankrupt. And his answer was 2 ways: gradually and then suddenly. And that line's always really stuck with me because it's not really about money. It's about how quickly things can get away from us. That things don't fall apart all at once. It happens bit by bit. It happens decision by decision until one day the foundation cracks and all of a sudden everything can fall away incredibly quickly. And we can see that, or at least I see that, all around Ontario now. You can see it in our healthcare system, where emergency rooms are closing, ER wait times are climbing, millions of Ontarians are even struggling to find a family doctor. You can feel it with the rising cost of living, where rents are going up. The cost of housing is getting too unattainable for too many people. Cost of groceries is going up every single week. And families are getting so squeezed that people are being forced out of this province to try and find a life elsewhere. And you can see it in our post-education systems. I'm lucky enough to have 2 incredible universities, the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University in my riding, but underfunding has left these universities and colleges scrambling to make cuts that have forced layoffs, and ultimately, we're not offering the same quality of education that we once did. None of these crises happened all at once. It was the result of a budget cut here, a policy decision there, but now we're at a breaking point where these cracks are starting to make a major impact for ordinary, everyday people. The decisions that we make in government make a difference. And what I've seen Doug Ford doing is absolutely terrifying me for the future of this province. So I want to spend the next 20 or so minutes talking to folks here a little bit more about exactly what this means, about what decisions Doug Ford has made and how they've weakened the systems that are so important to so many Ontarians. And then I want to lay out our plan a little bit. The Ontario Liberal Party has put forward a bold plan towards making life more affordable, towards making healthcare more accessible, and towards making education much more attainable to more people, that I think will make a major difference for this province. And I think it's something that we should fight for. So I'm proud to be standing up and fighting for it, but I'd love to spend a little bit of time here just walking us through exactly what's at stake in this election. Because if on February 27th, we do not change our government, this province could be in a real dangerous situation in a really quick time. Because things don't happen all at once. They happen slowly and then all at once. I wanted to start out maybe a little bit with our healthcare system and exactly what Doug Ford's done here. And we're starting to see cracks all over the place because Doug Ford has been pushing towards a privatized healthcare system that's not working for anybody. Doug Ford's actually taken away about $21 billion in funding over the next 6 years, which is a shortfall that jeopardizes our hospital systems all across this province. And this is on top of the fact that we've already got a shortage of 2.5 million doctors in this province. So what does that actually mean for regular people? Simply put, it means that these millions of people that don't have family doctors, and for the record, I am one of those, we're being forced into emergency rooms for small situations that should have been dealt with in clinics. These are incredibly wasteful for our resources, and this is why we're starting to see more and more hallway health care in this province, where we have to get rushed into emergency rooms where we're waiting for often over 15 hours to get the care that we need. This is terrifying, and this isn't just a problem or an inconvenience where folks are having to wait a long time to see a doctor. It is outright dangerous. People are sitting around waiting to get the care that they need, and on top of that, we're waiting for months to weeks to actually see specialists. So these are compounding issues that made healthcare in this province significantly less accessible to a huge proportion of this population. And on top of that, Doug Ford's disastrous Bill 124 that capped public sector wage increases at 1% actually drove more nurses and PSWs out of this province. So when we're in this crisis where we need more people to actually come in to start tackling this healthcare crisis head on, what's Doug Ford doing? He's actively undermining our healthcare system. He's trying to privatize as much of it as he possibly can, and where he can't, he's trying to actively make cuts and actively make it a worse place to work. This isn't about mismanagement. This is a plan. Doug Ford is actively starving our healthcare system because he wants to privatize healthcare. He does not want the system to be working well so that he can come in and say the only solution is private healthcare. But the Ontario Liberal Party knows better. We are proud of our public healthcare system. I think it's something that we absolutely need to be fighting for. Healthcare shouldn't be something that you need to be paying for, and your standard of care shouldn't be determined by how much you can pay. It should be based off of your actual needs. That's why Bonnie Crombie and the Ontario Liberal Party have proposed a bold plan to actually address these crises, to make sure that Ontarians are healthy and that we can all be extremely confident that we're going to be getting the care that we need. So we're going to invest $3.1 billion into our healthcare system to make sure that every Ontarian has a family doctor within the next 4 years. This is incredibly important because it's going to start removing these backlogs. It's going to make it easier to get into wait rooms and easier to get the care that you need. On top of that, we're committed to building 2 additional medical schools across this province to make sure that we're training and educating the actual doctors that we need right here locally. So right now, we're in a crisis. 2.5 million Ontarians do not have a family doctor. And there are several thousand doctors who are ready to retire imminently. This problem is going to get worse. We could see that number as high as about 50% of Ontarians by 2029. If this doesn't scare you, it should. Our quality of healthcare in this province is going down. And this is all a deliberate plan for a push towards privatization that's going to add more and more costs onto Ontarians at a time when, quite frankly, we can't bear it. The cost of living in Ontario is already absolutely extreme. In 2018, when we were looking at rent, the average person was paying about $1,100 or so per month. Now in Kitchener-Waterloo, that cost is over $2,000 a month. On top of that, the cost of groceries is rising, and we're fighting, it feels like a constant battle to keep that cost low. Just last year, an average family of 4 was spending about $16,000 a year just to feed themselves. That cost is expected to go up an additional $800 this year. And while we're doing all of this, there's hidden costs that are hitting us at every single corner. That's a subscription cost for what feels like absolutely everything these days. That's things like insurance. We're being hit from all angles right now, and you're really starting to feel it. I'm at the doors every single day chatting with people, and people are telling me how much they're struggling. People are having to cut vacations. People are having to change how they eat. And this is going to be a real problem for this province moving forward. We need to make sure that we're prioritizing, making sure that people have good jobs that are keeping up so that we can actually continue to prosper as a province. We don't want people to just be sitting around thinking, well, maybe I need to cut a vacation here and there. We're at a point now where people are wondering, am I going to be able to make rent? Am I going to be able to afford food? People are making really difficult decisions every single day in this province, and it's going to keep getting worse if we don't start solving anything about it. About half of Canadians are actually only $200 away from missing a bill payment, and that is absolutely terrifying. So we got to do everything that we can to make sure that a government is fighting for you, to make sure that you've got more money in your pocket, to make sure that you can spend the money where you need to. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is actually committed to a tax cut to support you and your family. We're going to cut your income tax, or income tax for middle-income families by about $1,000 a year. So that way you've got more money in your own pocket to spend on what you need. Because at the end of the day, you know what's best for you and your family, and you need a little bit of help right now. On top of that, we want to make sure that we're supporting people that need it most. ODSP has been static for too long. Doug Ford actually promised a 3% increase, and he couldn't even keep up with that promise. Because of that, we're asking some people that cannot work to live on $1,368 per month. That's impossible. We're asking people to skimp, to save, and we're asking people to choose between housing or food. I don't think that's right for anyone. So that's why the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to doubling the ODSP benefits, and we're going to make sure that we tie them or index them to inflation, because these costs keep going up, and we need to make sure that we're supporting absolutely everybody in this province, from your family to your neighbors, colleagues. Everyone might need a little bit of a hand up right now. So this isn't these problems aren't going to get solved by a $200 check that pops up in the mail once, suspiciously, just before an election. We need to make sure that we've got long-term plans to actually solve everything. It's just like Ernest Hemingway. Things can happen slowly and then all at once. So we want to make sure that Ontarians have the savings that they need to make sure that they're protected and that they can actually weather a couple of tough weeks, a couple of tough months. The Ontario Liberal Party is committed to actually fighting for you to make sure that we've got a system that is resilient and actually protects people. Lastly, I do want to hit a little bit here on our post-secondary education, and then I'll wrap up maybe talking a little bit more about myself here. But our post-secondary education system is, again, in shambles, again, to the surprise of nobody, because Doug Ford has chosen to completely ignore their funding. It's hurting staff, it's hurting students, and it's affecting our education, and it's affecting our competitiveness on a global stage. Back in 2019, Doug Ford had introduced a tuition freeze and mandated an actual 10% reduction in tuition fees. But I think that was all right in terms of trying to make education a little bit more accessible to people. But what he ignored is, by freezing that tuition, now post-secondary institutions are being asked to operate effectively off of 2019 budgets with 2025 costs. Because of that, it is becoming incredibly challenging for universities to offer really competitive programs where they've had to cut all over the place. So that can mean things like layoffs. That can mean things like cutting programs. The University of Waterloo announced a $75 million budget shortfall not too long ago, and they've had to do layoffs to actually accommodate that. At Laurier, it's not necessarily as bad, but they've had to trim back so many programs that it can really impact how students are working there. These universities are doing an incredible job with the limited resources that they've got, but it's beholden to a government to actually help people here. You really need to make sure that people have the support that they need to deliver a quality education that Waterloo is known for. And that's going to need actual funding here. One of the things that's really frustrated me is when Doug Ford, again in 2019, actually removed the student choice incentive. The SCI was essentially allowed students to opt out of certain fees that popped up on their tuition bills. And on the face of it, that sounds great. It sounds like we're giving students more choice, but in reality, what we're doing is we're making it harder for universities to fund programs that everybody needs. These are programs some folks will never have heard of that make a huge difference in the lives of others. And being able to opt out has made it really hard for a university to actually plan how to use their budget. And Doug Ford, beyond that, has actually made it tougher for students to get an education. He has made OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program, less accessible by essentially slashing all grants and moving everything towards loans, by reintroducing the interest on those loan payments. And to make matters worse, what he did is he made it so that you have to start repaying your loan immediately after graduating. So young graduates, people fresh out of school, don't even have a chance to get a stable job where they can actually start to build savings and before they're being sent a bill by the provincial government to start repaying their loans. All of these have weakened our post-secondary education system. You hear all over the place that universities are struggling to get by. That is inexcusable. Education should be a pathway to the middle class for everybody. Education lifts people up. It gives us a chance to study what we're passionate about, to make meaningful connections, both from professionally and friends, that stick with us for our entire lives. We need to make sure that we're actually investing in our education system. The Ontario Liberal Party is dedicated to supporting students and universities alike. For starters, on OSAP, we're taking interest off the loans again, because education is such an equalizer for so many people, and OSAP should not be a deterrent to stopping people from getting an education. It should be making education more accessible to more people. On top of that, we want to make sure that you don't have to repay your loans until you're making over $50,000 a year. That means you're going to have the chance to actually find stable income, to actually find a job that you're passionate about, that you can start working, start to save a little bit before starting to repay your loans. It's going to make a huge difference in the lives of young people, and I'm so excited to see exactly what kind of impact this will have on our universities. We're going to keep the tuition freeze there just to make sure that we're keeping university affordable for young people and more people, but that means that we do need more support for the universities. That's going to mean a ramp up in direct funding from the provincial government that we've absolutely got to be fighting for. And the Ontario Liberal Party will stick by our universities to make sure that they've got the resources that they need to fight for the services that you actually deserve. At the end of the day, government needs to be about fighting for people, not just a couple of wealthy insiders. Time and time again, what we've seen Doug Ford work on here is trying to slash funds to make universities less accessible, to make the cost of living go up, and to just downright undermine and undercut our healthcare system. Enough is enough. We're at a breaking point. You might not see it every single day, but I hope you don't have to go into an emergency room. But if you do, you're going to be waiting. You see all over the place that the cost of living is just getting incredibly more expensive. This is stuff that we absolutely need to tackle, because these aren't solutions that are going to pop up overnight. This is something that we need to fight for every single day and build long-term solutions. My background as a scientist has really trained me that we need to make sure that we're looking not only at the situation today, but the situation as it's going to be coming up over the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. So at the end of the day, good policy doesn't just support people today. It sets us up on a strong foundation to make sure that we're prepared for changes, that we understand how this population is going to change. Doug Ford has ignored this over the past 7 years, and as a result, we're feeling it in our systems. It's not a surprise that Ontario has an aging population. So why on earth would you go after underfunding our healthcare system? Right now, we're staring down essentially the barrel of a gun at tariffs from a president down in the United States. That is terrifying. We could be looking at a massive massive increase in cost for absolutely everything that crosses the borders. And that's going to make life more expensive for more people. Doug Ford's going around trying to talk a big game. He hasn't accomplished anything here. Life is getting more expensive. Healthcare is getting more inaccessible, and education is becoming more and more unattainable for more and more folks. This is something that we've absolutely got to fight for. Bonnie Crombie and the Ontario Liberal Party are the only party that have put forward a plan that's here to support you, ordinary people, instead of just enriching a couple of wealthy, well-connected insiders. I encourage you to take a look more into our detailed plan at voteclayton.ca, but I'm really excited about the future of a potential future under Bonnie Crombie. I'm a reasonably young candidate, 30 years old, so I've spoken with my friends, colleagues, family members, and folks are worried. Some have left the province because housing's too expensive. It's something that we absolutely need to make sure that we're tackling. I hear this absolutely all over the place, and maybe this will be the last thing that I touch on a little bit here, because housing has become one of the biggest expenses for too many people. I remember back when I was growing up, people would say, you should only be spending about 30% of your income on housing. And that metric is just completely unachievable now for way too many people. It's not uncommon for people to be spending greater than 50% of their income on rent alone. That is absolutely inexcusable. We need to make sure that we're tackling these issues and actually solving, and actually tackling our housing crisis to make sure that we've got everything fixed. We need to build about 1.5 million homes in this province over the next few years. We've got a plan to actually make sure that all of that's going to come into place. We're going to remove development charges for the developers to make sure that they're actually building. We're going to reintroduce rent control to make sure that landlords can't just crank up prices willy-nilly for you. And we're going to make housing more accessible for more people. Ontario is a place to be proud of. I'm proud to live in Ontario, and I know that our best days are still ahead of us. I am confident that none of these systems are beyond repair. I am confident that if we take action, if we take swift, decisive action now, that we can make a real difference for this province. We can make life more affordable. We can make healthcare more accessible to more people, and we can make sure that everyone has the education that they deserve. My name's Clayton Moore. I'm running to be Waterloo's next member of provincial parliament. If you have any questions or want to learn anything more, I encourage you to visit my website, voteclayton.ca, to learn a little bit more about our plan, how we're going to get there, and what I think the future of this province should look like. And Bob, thanks so much for having me here today, Bob.
You're welcome, Clayton. You've been listening to Clayton Moore, the Liberal Party candidate for Waterloo on Meet the Candidate. The views expressed were those of the candidate, not necessarily those of the Waterloo Board of Directors, volunteers, sponsors, or advertisers. All Waterloo Region candidates have been invited by email, but some candidates have declined to appear on the radio, and some have not responded at all. If you're a candidate and have missed the invitation, please contact me, Bob Jonkman, by email at bob@radiowaterloo.ca. There are still some available time slots. Meet the Candidate airs every weekday at 9 a.m. and 9:30 until Tuesday, the 25th of February 2025 on CKMS-FM 102.7 Radio Waterloo. Remember, the election is on Thursday, 27 February. Show notes, podcast, and video will be available shortly on the Radio Waterloo website at radiowaterloo.ca/MTC. The show is produced by me, Bob Jonkman, in the studios of CKMS-FM. The theme music is Falling Sky by Jason Shaw of Audionautics.com and used under Creative Commons International 4.0 Attribution Only license.